Oracle of Luna is a podcast with me, Bridget Engels, as your host. Here we have conversations with real live, present-day goddesses who are actively and courageously doing their magical work in the world. Each episode is a bewitching journey with relevant discussions on topics such as Wiccan pagan spirituality, writing, culture, magical practices, art, ritual, and the craft in its many forms. Merry meet! Welcome to another episode of the Oracle of Luna podcast. I'm Bridget Engels, your host, and today I am thrilled to chat with the marvelous Jane Meredith. Jane is a ritualist, teacher, and author of goddess spirituality books, including Aspecting the Goddess, Journey to the Dark Goddess, Circle of Eight, Elemental Magic, Falling Through the Tree of Life, and she lives in Australia and teaches internationally and online. So welcome, Jane.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Bridget.
Yeah. So how are you doing today there in Australia? I know it's very early in the morning.
7 a.m. The sky is getting light. So yeah, I'm great. Thanks.
Yeah. So we have a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to start asking some questions, and let's get rolling.
Great.
All right. So as always, I like to kind of start the podcast with my guests learning about their early beginnings. Do you want to background a little bit on your spiritual journey with the goddess and how it began?
Well, I think it began like as early as I can remember. I think that as a child, and I think most children are captivated by nature, by being outside. I loved the wind. I always loved rivers, trees. And I just had really, really special relationships with places and, yeah, things like the wind and trees. And to me, I think I never really lost that. And I had a sense, not just like that this is a tree or that this is the wind, but of the immanence of that, the being part of the whole world, that if I was like climbed a tree and lay on the branch and felt the wind moving the tree, that I was a part of that. And the river, the same. Like when I lay in the river, that it wasn't just the water was running over me. I felt like I was part of the life of the river.
Mm-hmm. So nature was very inspiring for you, and the animism.
Yeah, yes. And being a part of it, not just like that it was alive or that it was divine, but that I was part of that.
Right. And so you grew up in Australia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must have had a big influence on you as well. I mean, nature is very different there than here. And
I guess nature is different everywhere you go, right? But
yeah.
it's still nature.
Yeah.
And I think being in Australia mainly had a big influence on me more as an adult when I was, well, reading, for example, pagan books and magical books that always said things like the sun rises in the east and it moves through to the south. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Or the summer solstice is in mid-June. And I'm like, no, it's not. And I think that assumption that everything is in the northern hemisphere and that the whole world operates that way really allows pagans in the southern hemisphere not just to rebel, but to start questioning everything. Because if that isn't true, if what we're being told is this is the basis of it, is obviously, clearly untrue, then we can begin to say, well, what does work? What works for me? What works here? What works in this place? And I do think that kind of has given me personally, I've experienced that as giving me an edge on really making it up for myself.
Yeah, from an Australian perspective. And also there's the whole Indigenous Aboriginal aspect of living in Australia too. And
Definitely. I mean, with that
yeah.
goes the whole colonization kind of and, terrible history that exists not just in Australia, but in lots of other places in the world.
Oh yeah,
And
here for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that awareness that place and country is not just sacred, not like a separate sacred thing, not like a church over there or a standing stone circle over here, but that the whole of the land is alive and in continual sacred deep relationship with all of the living beings, including humans. And then kind of realizing from that perspective that that's really, I imagine, how it is everywhere. That indigeneity, like, all humans have been indigenous to the places that they lived in, evolved in, and that awareness of landscape and country and divinity as all alive and living and everywhere, and that we're part of it again. Like, I do think that that was really gifted to me by being lucky enough to live in Australia.
Mm-hmm. And did you go to university or college there and study goddess spirituality or?
No, I studied teaching. I have a Bachelor of Education,
Okay.
which has actually been very useful to me because I do teach. And
Yeah.
so I think that theoretical and experiential background in teaching was absolutely useful. But no, I was always a writer. I mean, from very, very young, as soon as really I learned to write, when I was 6, I was determined that I was a writer and that I wrote books and that I would write books. And so that's always been a very strong part of my identity.
And who or what has inspired you to or influenced you the most on your goddess spiritual journey? Do you have anybody?
I looked at that question that you wrote down and I thought, wow, like, it's the goddess herself speaks to me, like,
Yeah.
I'm sure she speaks to all of us in different ways, but I
Sure.
I really felt that. Um, and certainly there were humans, pointers along the way and experiences that I had, but really most strongly, um, I didn't have to go searching for the goddess. Like, she came for me. And she came for me, continually and in various small and big ways. And she came like as the earth, like the living presence of land. But she also came as individual goddesses like Persephone, Inanna, a couple of them, Isis, who really, I don't want to say tapped me on the shoulder, like grabbed me by the shoulder, you know, wrenched me around and said, hey, I'm here. This is a thing. Deal with it. Be with it.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I was actually in university. Well, I would always have called myself a feminist. I still do. And I was involved in feminist peace activist work,
Uh-huh.
as well as women's work in the, student kind of union.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was much more political than consciously spiritual, as a teenager and in my 20s. But I found that I could not separate them, and they were not separate, and kind of nothing's separate if you keep going long enough, I guess. So I felt like I had really deep personal meetings with the goddess that I could not turn away from.
Mm-hmm. And did this inspire you to start creating goddess rituals and ceremonies?
Well, yeah, first of all, of course, it inspired me to start seeking them out, where other people were
Right.
running them,
Yeah.
and going to events and workshops and reading books and, yeah, doing all of those things.
Yeah.
But I'm a person, I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit headstrong. Uh, I've got strong opinions, and I had been trained, as it happened, in both drama and teaching, and writing. And so a lot of what I found, I'm a very critical person as well. A lot of what I found I was quite critical of and I frustrated by. Like, I wanted something that I wasn't really getting. And
Yeah.
so I just knew, of course, well, if that's the case in anything, you've got to do it yourself, right? So
Sure.
I just started not even running, but offering to kind of almost anchor small, mainly women's groups, goddess groups, ritual groups, with just 5 or 6 people, where it was the leadership was all shared and we just explored and did our own thing. One time I met with a close woman friend once a week for a year, I think, and we created ceremony and ritual. And so I just kind of got into it that way, really, not,
Yeah.
for myself, because I wanted to. I
Yeah.
need, yeah. And then eventually I started, offering maybe a workshop at a conference or gathering, and getting a lot of great feedback and being really inspired by it and continuing.
Mm, that's often the way it happens is you're searching for something and you can't find it anywhere else, so you just kind of do it yourself and
That's
and
right. Like I knew what I wanted, right? And it seemed unreasonable that I was turning up to other people's events saying, well, I want it to be this and this and this,
right.
because that's
Yeah,
not necessarily what they wanted.
exactly. And it's such a creative process holding ritual and ceremony that it seems like, you have to have a vision, and if the vision doesn't jibe with your vision, it's like, why bother? you know?
Yeah. I mean, that co-creating where you get together, maybe with only one person, as I said, I have done it that way, but maybe 5 or 6 people,
Sure.
or maybe larger, and each person is contributing and kind of creating the magic,
Yeah.
whether you change who is in charge of it or you just all join together. Like that really
Yeah.
is one of my happiest places.
Yeah. When everybody's participating and everybody has a say, it makes it more spiritually powerful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's really bonding, and this feeling of like I don't think, obviously goddess is not a simple thing. I think divinity is incredibly, incredibly complex. Like there's so many thousands and millions of facets of it that when you have more than one person contributing like their facet of it, it gets richer and deeper.
And that leads me to my next question. In your books, you talk quite a bit about deity, and it is so complex, and there's so many. It's a vast amount of aspects, like you say. And what is deity to you? What does it mean?
Like it means a number of different things. There are obviously named deities that I have worked with and still work with. Inanna is one that I mentioned before, and her sister Ereshkigal in the underworld. Like I have absolute relationships, devotions, um, enormous respect and space for those deities, almost as like individual aspects of deity. Another thing that I'm really into is Kabbalah, and I think that teaches really clearly. It taught me really, really clearly that all of these deities are part of the divine, and actually the divine is everything. So
Right.
that for me, working with a goddess, say Persephone, is like a window, one of those facets, a more complex facet than an individual human, but still a
Mhm.
facet into the divine, which is all things.
And
And
it's also about myth too. We weave divinity into myth, right?
into story.
Into
Yeah.
story.
And often we've inherited those stories and myths from sometimes from previous cultures, and sometimes from our families, and who knows where we got them from, fairy
Yeah.
stories and things we hear in the wind, or dreams. People have really powerful dreams about myths and being inside myths. So clearly storytelling is like such a fundamental way of human relating with each other and with the world, both the divine and the natural world, which I personally think are the same thing.
Yeah.
um, that the myths, which are the pieces, the gems of the stories, if you like, that have lasted and stayed, and maybe they've changed and grown, but they still speak to us. They speak to our psychology, they speak to our relationships, they speak to this great yearning that we have for the divine.
Exactly. Deity and the divine are weaved into our lives and our different cultural perspectives and upbringings. And how can we explore deity and develop a personal relationship with a goddess? Say, I want to develop a relationship with Baba Yaga.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
You're
what?
I would, if sometimes the goddess comes to people like in a dream. I've definitely had
Sure.
people say this goddess turned up and she spoke a name I'd never heard it before, but I looked it up and it's a thing. So sometimes a deity comes for you, like specifically. Sometimes, like as you're saying, you set out and you go, oh, I'd like to develop a relationship with, Baba Yaga, for example. And I'd say, wow, if you, just in your general circle had been introduced to someone maybe or seen someone in a circle and you thought, wow, that's a really interesting person, I'd love to get to know her. I'd say, well, how would you go about it? Because I think it's pretty similar with when you want to develop a relationship with deity, right? So you don't ask them to move in when you've just met them. You you take
Right.
them a little gift, or you ask if they'd like to come and visit your house, or maybe we could have a coffee date sometime or go on a walk together, and you begin to develop a relationship, being really mindful of what it is that you're bringing, how you're showing up, what and relying on the qualities. Like if you've said, well, I'm going to create an altar tomorrow, and tomorrow you don't feel like it, well, probably if you're trying to develop a relationship, you do it anyway. So just being real, like we know how to develop relationships, and I really think that translating what we know from the human realm into the divine or into developing a relationship with place, I think is pretty similar. Like follow the social rules, turn up, be a good person, ask for what you want, offer what you've got,
be respectful.
Be respectful, create good boundaries, like all the things, and basically see what happens.
It's definitely a discovery, isn't it? With many layers to explore.
Yeah, and just remembering that that I'm human and that they're not human, and that perspective, which I think different aspects of goddess or deity handle or evidence in very, very different ways. Like one of the deities I worked with is the star goddess, and literally I could say, like her vast, broad love for all things. Oh yes, humans, sure, kind of. And like one human in particular, oh, amazing, moving on, hard to hold her attention, although, her attention is everywhere and always and for all time, compared with a goddess that I have felt I've created a much more personal relationship with, which I would say one of mine is Persephone. And that might not be the same for everyone. I'm not saying that's the rule. It's just my experience that just like when you're creating new friends have different ways of turning up to that friendship.
Right. So we know that you love to write from an early age, and you are the author of several best-selling books. Can you tell us a little bit about your amazing Aspecting the Goddess book and what motivated you to write this book?
I so can tell you about that book, Bridget. This is a book, every book maybe is special in its own way. This one is really special to me because I waited a long, long time to write it. Like I knew I had it in me. And because it was so personal, I think it's my most personal book. I didn't want, this sounds whatever. I did not want an editor to come in and kind of rewrite it or say, oh, no, we don't want it like this. It should be more like that. So I waited a long, long time to write it in my writing journey, although I knew that I wanted to do it and I knew kind of how I wanted it to be. I waited until I felt I had enough clout with a publisher to be able to say, I'm going to write this book. This is how it's going to be. I'm going to choose the cover. I'm going to choose the title. I'm going to choose the back cover copy. This is the book. And until a publisher would say yes. And so I wanted a lot of editorial control over it, because it was so personal, because it was like my stories of working with the magic of the goddess of divinity. And I wanted it to be incredibly personal, to show in a way, not just like this was my personal journey, but like this is the depth or breadth or range of kind of personal journeys that you, the reader, might have, maybe with goddesses, maybe it will be with nature deities, maybe it will be with something else entirely, but to really go into like the depth of personal experience. And then because there's 12 different stories with 12 different deities, like the breadth of that as well, how different they are from one to the other, and to really put that on the page, because that's what I love reading. Like, I love reading people's personal journeys, people's personal stories. And I don't know if it's like how we write or what we're told is publishable or sellable, but often in spiritual or goddess books that I've found, people make references to their personal journeys, and some people write about it more deeply. And I'm always really grateful for those people, really in an kind of exposed way, so you can really feel it and see the bones of it. But that's what I wanted to put on the page.
Yeah. Well, that definitely comes through this amazing book. I highly recommend it to all our listeners. So, writing this book, and then you also wrote a best-selling book called Journey to the Dark Goddess. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, sure. Journey to the Dark Goddess. So while I was writing that book, I have to say, all the way through it, I kept thinking, who is ever going to read this book? Nobody will want to read a book about the dark goddess, about the underworld, about the journeys that we can, but often have to make into those most difficult, most challenging parts of our lives, characterized by the underworld and the underworld journey. So the whole time I was writing, I was really convinced that I had to write it, I wanted to write it, I needed to write it, but I was not convinced that anybody would ever read it. So the fact that out of all of my books, that has been the best-selling by far, continues to astound, delight, amaze me. And I mean, maybe I should have known that, because out of all the work and the workshops I do, it's the Dark Goddess that is most continually called for. It's the one I get the most emails about, the most questions. Often, if I was going to present a workshop at some event, I'd give them a list of 10 things I could do, one of which was the Dark Goddess. And almost unfailingly, whoever it was who was organising the thing would choose the Dark Goddess.
Interesting. Well, people, maybe it's a need.
It totally is a need. Like, our whole culture, our whole society is completely really in denial and does not cope very well with all of the topics that the Dark Goddess embraces, including death and grief and pain and loss and heartbreak and depression, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, right. Those are all part of life, human life.
Totally. Yep.
So, in aspecting the goddess, what are the benefits of aspecting a goddess? And I know for some of us Wiccans, we understand drawing down the moon or invoking a goddess. Your chapter on aspecting a goddess, can you go through that a little bit? What is it? What is aspecting? What do we get out of doing this?
Well, firstly, I'd just say, like, it's certainly not compulsory. It's something some people love to do. And there are different terms for very similar things, including drawing down, and including embodiment, and including, in other traditions, possession. They're all slightly different versions of the same thing, which is inviting a deity or an aspect of deity into one's actual human body. And it's usually done in ritual. All of those things are usually done in ritual, and often with very strong boundaries and tenders or other people present who know what's going on, who can look after the human as well as the goddess or deity that is there. I would say aspecting, which I learned in the reclaiming tradition, is a very precise form of that, where there's, like, I want to say, a contract between the person who is doing the aspecting or drawing down or embodiment and the deity. And so, because there's a tight, strong container, for me, having great boundaries allows me to experience something more fully. And so this aspecting has really worked for me, where I might say, like, in that book, I think there's a chapter on Eve, my relationship with Eve, and goes into when I was aspecting Eve in quite a large ritual for a few hours, and like the process of that and how it felt to be present with this goddess, this aspect of deity, the divine Eve. And I had, like all of the goddesses in the books, I have personal relationships with, have different types and depths. I guess that's the point of it. But what would you get out of it? Like, Normally you learn to do it in stages. That's actually the final section of this book, aspecting, and there are many earlier sections of kind of creating relationship with deity and how to do that. This book it doesn't just have these long form stories of my personal experience. It's also a workbook which goes through 6 different ways of relating to deity. And I have put aspecting as the kind of last one because I think you need all the skills of all the previous ones to preferably to be able to do it really well and confidently and happily. And yeah, it's not something that everybody loves to do, but if you do like lean that way, experiment that way, certainly in the book I've got really strong outlines, guidelines, kind of what previous work, that you can do working up to it and suggestions of how to do it.
But in the end, it's going to be a powerful spiritual experience.
Yes, but not always the way you expect.
Right, right. Because
thinking of you developing your relationship with Baba Yaga, for instance,
yeah, because we don't know, we're working with a goddess and through the goddess, and we don't really know what all is going to happen.
Absolutely. And I totally have had experiences, which are in that book, of being completely taken and held and loved and being in great, deep communion, like with Eve. And I've also had experiences also in that book, like the Star Goddess experience, where I would say like she was with me for, a nanosecond. And then basically, there were other things going on in the universe. And she had already, plumbed the complete depths of the entire ritual and me and everything that was happening in that microsecond that I felt her totally present. And the rest of the ritual where I was still nominally holding or aspecting the Star Goddess, like I was going on that memory and that feel and that openness that I had experienced in that tiny, tiny moment of time.
For people who are just starting out exploring goddess spirituality, is there anything that we can do or they can do to weave the myth of the goddess into the context of just their everyday life?
I mean, I think, myth is so powerful because it resonates in our lives. So the myths that you are drawn to, if you're drawn to myths of, dark Russian forests, go there. You might physically actually go there, but I meant to begin with, open a book, start reading, start imagining, maybe start drawing, maybe create an altar, like where one is drawn, like I would pay attention to that. Like it's no good being drawn to dark European forests, but saying, well, I'm going to investigate an Egyptian, desert deity. I mean, you could do that academically or intellectually, but if your heart and your kind of subconscious or unconscious is calling you to these dark Russian woods, well, I'd say sooner or later you're going to end up there.
Yeah. There's something like you say, calling to us. It's a voice or image or a thought or
a dream, or a
dream.
memory of a book that we once read as a child. Or, as I said, so many people have said to me that they had a dream and the name of the goddess was spoken and that they didn't even know that was the name of the goddess when they heard the word, but they woke up and they remembered it.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Before we end here, I'd like to ask, what are some of your upcoming plans for the future? Do you have any new workshops or courses or events coming up?
Thanks, Bridget. Yes, I do. I have 2 workshops happening in the UK in June, aspecting the goddess, in fact, as an experiential learn how to do it workshop happening in Sheffield, June 8 and 9. And then a Witch's Elements of Magic that I'm co-teaching with Raven Edgewalker, happening in Somerset, also in the UK, June 29 and 30. And so those are in-person events. And there are other ones that you can always find on my calendar on my website. I also have just managed to complete creating the Journey to the Dark Goddess as an online do-at-your-own pace course. It's not yet up on my website, but it is actually available. So someone could email me or contact me through Instagram or Facebook if they wanted to find out more about that.
Wonderful.
And I'll be releasing it soon. Yeah, thanks. And
Yep. Go on.
Well, I was going to say that those are the main things. Like there are also other things on my calendar, and I guess in a year, seems a long time, not quite a year, there's another book being released that I've co-written with Theo Gede Palmer that we've written. This is the third book that we've written together, and that's called Magic of the Pearl Pentacle.
Ooh, exciting. You've got a lot brewing there. So
Yeah.
sounds wonderful. All right. Well, uh, lastly, do you have a website that people can learn more about you and your books?
Sure. I have a website, which is www.janemeredith.com. And I'm on Facebook as Jane Meredith Author and Instagram Jane Meredith Author.
Wonderful. So that about wraps it up for us. Thanks to all the listeners who are tuned in, and thank you, Jane, for joining us today, for your radiance and passion, and for inspiring us all to connect with the divine feminine and the goddess. So
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I really think like if you've got it in your heart, if you've got it in your mind, if you're drawn to it, that the path is just there, just totally there for you.
waiting to explore. Thank you, and blessed be. Bye.